She stared at her mother's casket, alone in a crowd of strangers pretending to grieve. Nia Hamilton adjusted the black veil, covering her face, grateful for the shield between her tears and their curious eyes. At 24, she shouldn't be burying her only ally in the world. What would you do if your family stole everything and smiled at your funeral? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The Atlanta summer heat pressed down like a weight, making the black dress cling to her skin. No siblings stood beside her. No father offered support. Just whispers from distant relatives who'd shown up for appearances, not comfort. Poor thing. All alone now. Wonder what happens to Yvonne's money. They didn't bother lowering their voices. Why would they? The Hamilton family had perfected the art of talking about people, not to them, especially her. The pastor spoke words that didn't capture her mother at all. Yvonne Hamilton deserved poetry, not platitudes. She'd been magic, turning grapes into award-winning wine, turning hardship into lessons, turning a quiet daughter into a woman strong enough to stand here today. Rain threatened overhead, dark clouds gathering despite the forecast for clear skies. Perfect. Even the weather refused to cooperate. As the final prayer ended, the small crowd began to disperse, offering mechanical hugs and practiced condolences. Nia nodded, thanked them, performed her role. The good daughter, the only one left to remember her mother properly. That's when she heard it. The distinct purr of an engine that didn't belong among the modest cars in the cemetery parking lot. Heads turned as a sleek black Bentley rolled to a stop on the narrow cemetery path. The kind of car that announced money before its driver even emerged. The back door opened, and he stepped out. Cole Mercer. Even if she hadn't recognized him from financial magazines and news segments, she would have known him by the way conversation stopped, by how her father's friends suddenly found the ground fascinating, by the electric change in the atmosphere. He moved with the confidence of a man who owned every room he entered, even a graveyard. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes the color of expensive whiskey and skin the warm brown of aged leather. Not handsome in the conventional sense, but magnetic. Powerful. Somewhere in his 40s, but carrying it with the assurance that made age irrelevant. What struck her wasn't his tailor black suit or the way people parted before him like the Red Sea. It was the flowers in his hand, Carolina jasmine, her mother's favorite, not roses or lilies like everyone else had brought. He knew her, really knew her. Their eyes locked across the emptying cemetery, and Nia felt something shift in her chest. Recognition, though they'd never met. Connection, though they were strangers. Cole Mercer walked directly toward her, ignoring the murmurs that followed. He stopped exactly 2 feet away, close enough to speak privately, far enough to respect her space. "I'm sorry about your mother," he said, his voice deep and smooth. Yvonne deserved better than this world gave her. No empty platitudes. No pretending they'd see her again someday. Just truth. "You knew her well?" Nia asked, though something told her she already knew the answer. Once. A wealth of history in that single word. A lifetime ago. He placed the jasmine on the casket, his fingers lingering on the polished wood. The gesture felt intimate, like interrupting a goodbye between lovers. "You're her daughter. You have her eyes. And you're Cole Mercer." She straightened her spine. "The man my father refuses to mention and my mother used to watch on CNN." A smile touched his lips, gone almost before it appeared. "So she'd talk about me?" "Barely. Just enough to make me curious." Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by a low rumble of thunder. The remaining mourners hurried toward their cars, leaving Nia alone with this stranger who didn't feel like a stranger at all. "Your ride appears to have left," Cole observed, glancing toward the departing vehicles. Her father's Audi was already turning onto the main road, not even a backward glance to see if she needed anything. Typical. Cole's hand brushed against hers as he turned slightly, the briefest contact sending an unexpected current up her arm. She blamed grief for the reaction. Emotions were too close to the surface today. "Need a ride?" he asked, his voice wrapping around her like velvet. The question hung between them, weighted with something beyond simple transportation. Rain began to fall, fat drops hitting the casket with soft taps. Nia should say no. This man was her father's former business partner, clearly wealthy and powerful, offering something she didn't fully understand. Every logical part of her brain urged caution. But logic hadn't served her family well. Logic hadn't protected her mother's estate from being stolen right out from under her. Logic hadn't kept her father loyal or honest. Maybe it was time for something besides logic. Yes, she said, meeting his gaze directly. I think I do. Their fingers brushed again as he guided her toward the waiting car, this time lingering a moment longer than necessary. The warmth of his hand against her rain-chilled skin felt like a question, one she wasn't ready to answer. As the driver held the door, Cole leaned close. The scent of his cologne, something woodsy and expensive, mingled with the smell of rain. Your father will hate that you left with me, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. Nia slid into the leather seat, the luxury enveloping her. Good, she replied, surprising herself with the venom in her voice. That makes two of us who lost someone today. His eyes flashed with something, approval, perhaps, as he joined her in the back seat. The door closed with a solid thunk, sealing them in together as the rain poured down outside. One decision could alter her entire bloodline, and she just made it. The Bentley glided through Atlanta's rain-slick streets, wipers keeping perfect rhythm against the downpour. Inside, the climate-controlled cabin remained untouched by the storm. Much like Cole Mercer himself seemed untouched by the chaos of emotion swirling around Nia's life. I know about the vineyard, he said after several minutes of silence, eyes fixed ahead rather than on her. And what your father did with it. Nia's breath caught. How could you possibly? Money buys information, Ms. Hamilton, and I have plenty of money. The casual way he mentioned his wealth should have seemed arrogant. Instead, it felt like stating that water was wet, a simple fact without pride attached. My mother built that vineyard from nothing, Nia said, anger replacing grief for a blessed moment. 20 years of work, award-winning wines, and somehow my father managed to transfer everything into his name before she died, then sold it all to developers 2 weeks later. While you were at her bedside in hospice, Cole added. Not a question. Nia stared at his profile. You really have been watching. I've been waiting. Before she could ask for what, the car pulled up to a gleaming high-rise in Buckhead, one of those buildings where the penthouses started at 8 figures. Of course he lived here. Men like Cole Mercer didn't do modest. The driver opened an umbrella, escorting them inside where a doorman nodded respectfully. Mr. Mercer. The private elevator required a fingerprint and carried them directly to the top floor. Cole's penthouse opened before them, a sprawling space of glass and steel with views across the rain-lashed city. Modern art hung on walls. Furniture looked designer but comfortable, and floor-to-ceiling windows made the lighting seem like a private show. Make yourself comfortable, Cole said, shrugging off his suit jacket. Drink. I need answers more than alcohol. Fair enough. He disappeared down a hallway, returning moments later with a leather portfolio. This might help with both. The portfolio contained documents, court filings, property transfers, bank statements. Nia's hands trembled as she flipped through pages of her family's private business. Evidence of her father's betrayal laid out in cold, legal language. How did you get these? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. As I said, money. But why? She looked up, finding him watching her with those penetrating eyes. Why would you care about my mother's vineyard? About me? Cole moved to stand by the window, lightning illuminating his face in harsh flashes. Your father and I were partners once. More than that, friends. Until we weren't. What happened? He betrayed me. Simple words, complex history. Not financially, though he tried. Personally. Nia stood, moving closer to him, drawn by the gravity of his presence. My mother never explained why your name was forbidden in our house. Just that you and my father had a falling out before I was born. Is that what she called it? A falling out. His laugh held no humor. Your father destroyed something precious to me. And now, 25 years later, he's done the same to you. Lightning cracked close by, making Nia jump. Cole's hand steadied her, resting lightly on her shoulder. The contact felt electric, inappropriate given the circumstances, yet she didn't pull away. "I can help you get it back," he said, his voice dropping lower. "All of it. The vineyard, the money, your mother's legacy." Their proximity in the dimly lit penthouse created a bubble of intimacy that made her heartbeat quicken. Professional interest, she told herself. Nothing more. "Why would you help me?" she asked, forcing strength in her voice. "What's in it for you?" His hand slid from her shoulder, fingertips grazing her arm before pulling away entirely. The loss of contact felt significant. "Let's call it mutual benefit. Your father fears very few things in this world. I'm one of them. You potentially are another." She moved to his desk, continuing through the documents. Something caught her eye, her mother's signature on the will that transferred everything to her father. This isn't right," she whispered. "This isn't her signature." Cole appeared beside her, shoulder brushing hers as he leaned in to see. "You're certain? I'd know my mother's handwriting anywhere. This is close but wrong." The Y in Yvonne, she always looped it differently. Their faces were inches apart now, his clean scent distracting her from the forgery before them. His finger traced the signature, then her hand, the touch lingering. "Your father thinks he buried this," he whispered, close enough that she felt his breath on her cheek. "Let me help you dig it up." Nia met his gaze, searching for deception, but finding only intensity. Whatever game Cole Mercer was playing, he needed her as much as she needed him. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Mercer?" His smile was slow, dangerous. "Something that will give us both what we want." Morning light streamed through the guest bedroom windows of Cole's penthouse. Nia had slept in her funeral clothes, too exhausted after hours of reviewing documents to care about propriety. Now, showered and dressed in clothes the housekeeper had somehow procured in exactly her size, she stood in Cole's home office waiting for him to finish a call. He paced by the windows, phone against his ear, profile sharp against the Atlanta skyline. Even in casual clothes, dark jeans, and a charcoal Henley that probably cost more than her monthly rent, he exuded authority. "That won't be necessary," he was saying, voice clipped. "The meeting stays scheduled. Tell them they can either attend or explain to their shareholders why they rejected a face-to-face with me." He ended the call, turning his attention fully to her. The weight of his focus was physical, like standing in direct sunlight. "Sleep well?" he asked, gesturing for her to sit. "As well as anyone does after burying their mother and discovering their father committed fraud." She took the offered chair, but kept her spine straight. "You mentioned a proposal." Cole smiled slightly at her directness. "I did." He moved behind his desk, but remained standing. "I've spent 20 years building an empire, Ms. Hamilton. Technology, real estate, clean energy. But your father has something I want, control of Meridian Financial Services." "My father's investment firm? What does that have to do with me?" "Everything." Cole leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. "Charles Hamilton chairs the board of Meridian, which controls significant government pension contracts. Contracts I want access to. He's blocked my attempts to acquire shares for years." Nia frowned. "I still don't see how I factor in." "Your father values legacy above all else. It's why he stole your mother's vineyard, to fold it into his family holdings. It's why he's built Meridian into what it is today." Cole's eyes narrowed. What would happen to that carefully crafted image if his only daughter married his greatest enemy? The room went silent. Nia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Married," she repeated flatly. "Yes. To you." "Yes. That's insane. That's business." Cole moved around the desk, standing closer now. "A mutually beneficial arrangement. You get resources to reclaim your vineyard and financial security. I get leverage against your father and access to Meridian." Nia stood abruptly, needing to move. "You're suggesting I marry you, a man twice my age who I met yesterday, despite my father?" "I'm suggesting a partnership," he corrected, voice even. "A contractual marriage with clear terms and benefits for both parties. Your age is irrelevant. You're clearly intelligent and capable. As for knowing me," his mouth curved slightly, "some people spend decades together and never truly know each other. Just ask your parents." The barb hit its mark. Nia turned away, moving to the window. Atlanta spread before her, oblivious to the absurd proposition being discussed 60 floors up. "This is crazy," she muttered. "Is it?" Cole stepped behind her, close enough that she could feel his presence without him touching her. "Your father left you with nothing. No inheritance, no support. Just a Stanford law degree and student loans. I'm offering you the resources to fight back." His proximity made it hard to think clearly. And what exactly would this contractual marriage entail? Public appearances together, shared residence, united front against your father's business interests. Private lives remain separate. And intimacy? The question escaped before she could reconsider. Cole moved beside her, their reflections visible in the glass. His eyes met hers in the window, not required by contract. The unspoken implication hung between them. Not required, but not forbidden either. "I want the marriage to last at least 3 years," he continued. "Long enough to secure my position with Meridian. You'd receive a substantial monthly allowance, plus funding to pursue legal action regarding the vineyard. Upon dissolution, you keep a predetermined settlement." Nia laughed without humor. "You've thought of everything. I didn't build what I have by leaving details to chance." She turned to face him directly. "And if I refuse? Then I wish you luck in your legal battle against your father. I'm sure your starting salary at whatever law firm hires you will cover the retainers for estate litigation." The statement wasn't delivered cruelly, just factually. They both knew she couldn't afford to fight her father alone. "We'll keep it strictly business," she said, testing the words. Cole stepped closer, invading her space with deliberate slowness. His fingers brushed her wrist, tracing the delicate bones there in a touch that felt anything but businesslike. Her pulse jumped traitorously beneath his fingertips. "Nothing between us will ever be strictly business, Nia," he said, using her first name for the first time. The sound of it in his deep voice sent an involuntary shiver through her. She pulled her hand away, needing distance to think clearly. "I need time. You have until tomorrow morning. Your father is calling a press conference to announce Meridian's expansion. I'd like our engagement announcement to overshadow it." Of course he would. Everything was strategy with this man. "This is insane," she repeated, more to herself than to him. Cole watched her unrushed. Sometimes insanity is the most rational response to an irrational world. "Your father taught me that." Nia gathered her composure, meeting his gaze directly. "If, and that's a big if, I agreed to this, I'd have conditions of my own." Interest flickered in his eyes. "I expected nothing less. I maintained control of my mother's vineyard once recovered. Complete control. Done. I want a detailed contract review by my own lawyer. Of course. And I want to know everything about what happened between you and my father. The full truth." Something darkened in Cole's expression. "Some truths come with their own price, Nia. I'm already selling myself to you, Mr. Mercer." What higher price could there be? His smile held no warmth. "You might be surprised." 3 days after her mother's funeral, Nia found herself in the passenger seat of Cole's Range Rover, heading north on I-85 toward North Carolina. The prenuptial agreement sat in her laptop bag, signed that morning after her lawyer, paid for by Cole, had reviewed the terms. 24 hours ago, she'd been a grieving daughter with no prospects. Now she was engaged to one of the richest men in the Southeast, plotting against her own father and feeling strangely alive for the first time in years. "You're quiet," Cole observed, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting on the console between them. "Processing," she replied, watching the landscape change from city to rolling countryside. "It's not every day a woman agrees to marry a stranger for revenge and real estate." His laugh was unexpected, a rich sound that transformed his usually guarded expression. "When you put it that way, it does sound like a paperback novel, with a terrible title, The Billionaire's Revenge Bride. I prefer assets and liabilities." Their shared amusement felt dangerous, too comfortable, too real. This was business, she reminded herself, not friendship, certainly not romance. "Why are we going to the vineyard?" she asked, changing the subject. "We both know my father sold it." "Know your battlefield," Cole replied, eyes on the road. Besides, you need to see what you're fighting for. 2 hours later, they turned onto a familiar gravel road. Hamilton vines had been part of Nia's childhood. Summers spent helping her mother with the harvest, winters learning how each barrel aged differently. The vineyard had been small but respected, producing wines that won regional awards. What greeted them now made her stomach turn. Construction equipment stood parked on fields where grapevines once flourished. Trenches had been dug for foundations. The tasting room, her mother's pride, had already been demolished, reduced to a pile of timber and stone. Cole parked, and Nia stepped out, the Carolina summer heat instantly enveloping her. She walked toward what remained of the main house, each step heavier than the last. "They're building luxury condos," Cole explained, following behind her. "Weekend getaways for Charlotte executives." "They didn't waste any time," Nia said, voice tight with anger. "My mother's been dead less than a week. The sale went through 2 months ago, while she was still alive." Nia spun to face him. "What? That's impossible. She would never." "She didn't. Your father used the power of attorney he obtained during her illness. The paperwork was processed before she could object." The betrayal cut deeper than Nia had imagined. Not just theft after death, but while her mother still drew breath. While Nia had been sitting at her hospital bedside, her father had been selling her mother's life's work. She turned back to the destruction, tears threatening. A loud engine roared to life as one of the bulldozers began moving, sending a cloud of dust toward them. Cole was suddenly beside her, arm around her shoulders, pulling her against his chest to shield her from the dirt cloud. "Easy," he murmured against her hair. "I've got you." The protective embrace should have felt foreign from a man she barely knew. Instead, her body responded with an instinctive yielding, molding against his solid frame. His hand splayed across her back, warm through the thin material of her blouse. Dust swirled around them, creating a strange cocoon of intimacy. When the air cleared, neither moved immediately. Cole's heartbeat sounded steady against her ear, his cologne mingling with the earthy scent of disturbed soil. His thumb traced small circles at the base of her spine, a gesture too intimate for their arrangement, yet too comforting to reject. Nia finally stepped back, unsettled by her reaction to him. "Thank you." His eyes had darkened, pupils expanded. Whatever was happening between them, she wasn't the only one affected. "We should check the south field," she said, needing distance. My mother's experimental vines were there, hybrid varietals she was developing. They walked the perimeter of the property, Nia pointing out what had been where. To his credit, Cole listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine interest, not just strategic calculation. In the furthest corner of the property, Nia stopped short. There, somehow overlooked by the developers, stood a single row of grapevines, her mother's prized creation, a variety she'd been perfecting for years. "They're still alive," she whispered, moving closer. The vines looked neglected but viable, stretching toward the sun with stubborn determination. Nia touched a leaf, feeling the living connection to her mother. Emotion swelled, pushing against the wall she'd built to survive the past weeks. "I want it all back," she whispered, gripping the vine. "Every acre, every grape." Cole came to stand beside her, his hand covering hers on the vine. The touch was electric, charged with purpose and something deeper neither acknowledged. "Then marry me next month," he said, voice low and certain. "We'll announce it at the Meridian Charity Gala. Maximum impact." Nia looked at their hands together on her mother's creation, a strange symbolism she couldn't ignore. His tan skin against hers, both touching what her mother had nurtured. Past and future, revenge and rebirth, all twisted together like the vine itself. She met his eyes, finding intensity that matched her own. 1 month, she agreed. "Let's make it count." The Georgian-style mansion where Nia had grown up stood like a fortress on the outskirts of Atlanta, its white columns and manicured grounds projecting old money stability that her father had worked his entire life to achieve. Now, as Cole's car pulled through the iron gates for Sunday dinner, Nia felt like an invader in her childhood home. "Remember the objective," Cole said quietly, adjusting his tie. The dark blue suit he wore probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, but on him it looked essential, like a second skin. This isn't about reconciliation. Trust me, Nia replied, smoothing her own carefully selected outfit, a cream dress that had belonged to her mother. Reconciliation is the last thing on my mind. Cole's hand covered hers briefly. Follow my lead if things get complicated. But this is your show. The unexpected support steadied her. She'd expected him to dominate this confrontation, not position her as the central player. It was becoming clear that Cole Mercer was more complex than the cold businessman she'd initially assumed. The housekeeper answered the door, her eyes widening at the sight of Cole. Miss Nia and Mr. Mercer, your father didn't mention. That's because he doesn't know. Nia smiled pleasantly. We're expected, though. The dining room looked exactly as it had for every Sunday dinner of her childhood. Crystal glasses, polished silver, fresh flowers. Her father stood at the head of the table, phone to his ear. He froze mid-sentence when he saw them enter. I'll call you back, he said sharply, ending the call. Antoinette didn't mention you were bringing a guest, Nia. Charles Hamilton had aged well, silver threading through dark hair that matched Nia's own, skin a few shades lighter than hers, still fit from regular tennis. Only the deep lines around his mouth betrayed his 62 years and the strain of recent events. Hello, Charles, Cole said before Nia could respond. It's been a while. The color drained from her father's face. What is the meaning of this? How dare you bring him into my home? Our home, Nia corrected. Mother's home. Technically, since this property was purchased with her family money. Charles's gaze darted between them, calculation replacing shock. Nia, whatever this man has told you, is probably more truth than I've heard from you in years, she interrupted. Shall we sit? I'd hate for dinner to get cold while we argue in the doorway. The tension during the meal was thick enough to cut with the expensive steak knives. Charles attempted normal conversation, asking about Nia's job search and apartment. She answered minimally, watching him avoid looking directly at Cole, who ate with perfect manners and unnerving calm. When the housekeeper brought coffee, Nia decided the time for pretense had ended. I know about the vineyard, she said, setting down her cup with deliberate care. I know you transferred it to your name while Mom was dying. I know you sold it immediately for development. Charles's expression hardened. Your mother's business was failing. I made a sound financial decision. It wasn't yours to make. I was protecting your inheritance, he insisted. The cash from that sale is invested. In your name, Cole interjected smoothly. In accounts Nia can access. Charles finally looked directly at Cole, hatred evident. Stay out of my family business. That's going to be difficult, Nia said, considering Cole and I are engaged. The coffee cup in her father's hand crashed to the saucer. What did you say? You heard me. She reached for Cole's hand across the table, the gesture practiced but still sending an unexpected flutter through her stomach when his warm fingers interlaced with hers. This is absurd, Charles sputtered. You barely know him. He's twice your age. He's rich, powerful, threatening to your control, Nia suggested. Or were you going to say he's white? Because we both know your objections have nothing to do with his race and everything to do with your history. Charles stood abruptly. This conversation is over. You're confused with grief, Nia. This man is using you. To get to you? She asked. Absolutely. Just like you used Mom's illness to steal her legacy. You have no idea what you're talking about, her father snapped. Cole Mercer is poison. Always has been. Cole had remained calm throughout, but now he stood, moving behind Nia's chair. His hands rested on her shoulders in a possessive gesture that felt both performative and oddly natural. Tell her about 2004, Charles, Cole said, voice deceptively gentle. Tell her what really happened before she was born. Her father's face drained of color. Get out of my house. Tell her why you're so afraid of me being close to your daughter. Something in Cole's tone made Nia's skin prickle. This wasn't just business rivalry. This was deeper, more personal than she'd understood. He's using you to get to me, her father said, eyes locked on Nia now. Whatever he's promised you is more than you ever delivered, she finished. The wedding is next month. Small ceremony, big reception. The press will be there. Charles moved around the table, desperation breaking through his usual control. Nia, please. You don't understand what you're doing. Understand perfectly, she replied, standing to face him. I'm taking back what's mine, starting with my mother's vineyard. As if on cue, Cole's hand slid to her lower back, a warm presence that both steadied and unsettled her. The gesture was calculated for her father's benefit, but the heat that spread from his touch felt dangerously real. Cole bent slightly, lips brushing against her neck in a display that crossed from acting into something that made her pulse race. We should go, he murmured against her skin, loud enough for her father to hear. Her father's face drained of color. He's using you to get to me. Nia's smile was cold as winter. Maybe I'm using him too. The Meridian Financial Services annual charity gala transformed the High Museum of Art into a showcase of wealth and influence. Atlanta's elite moved through galleries and designer evening wear, champagne flutes catching light from crystal chandeliers brought in just for the occasion. Art worth millions hung on walls, but the real masterpieces were the power plays happening between smiles and handshakes. Nia stood in the museum's grand entryway, Cole's hand resting lightly on her back. Her black gown, selected by the stylist Cole had hired, hugged her curves before cascading to the floor in liquid silk. The 3-carat diamond on her left hand caught every beam of light, announcing their engagement before they'd spoken a word. Nervous? Cole asked, his breath warm against her ear. Should I be? She countered, maintaining her smile as cameras flashed nearby. Just follow my lead. Remember, I know my role, she interrupted. 3 weeks of intensive preparation had drilled the evening's objectives into her. Make an impression, charm key board members, position herself as Cole's perfect partner, unsettle her father. Cole's mouth curved. I was going to say, remember to enjoy watching Charles squirm. The unexpected humor relaxed her. For all his calculated planning, Cole occasionally revealed glimpses of genuine feeling, particularly when it came to making her father uncomfortable. They moved into the main gallery, where Atlanta's financial and social elite clustered in groups. Conversations paused as they passed, curious eyes following their progress. The engagement announcement had made the business pages that morning, generating exactly the buzz Cole had predicted. Cole Mercer, drawled a silver-haired man, extending his hand. Bold move coming to Charles Hamilton's territory. George, Cole nodded, shaking hands. I wasn't aware Meridian had claimed the entire city. They haven't yet, the man laughed, turning to Nia. And who's the lovely lady? My fiancée, Nia Hamilton. The man's eyebrows shot up. Hamilton? Any relation to our host? His daughter, Nia replied smoothly, offering her hand. The conversation that followed was the first of many, each with subtle variations, but the same undercurrent of shock and curiosity. By the time they reached the bar, whispers trailed in their wake like perfume. Your father just arrived, Cole murmured, accepting 2 champagne flutes from the bartender. Northwest corner, with the board chairman. Nia took the offered glass, using the movement to glance in that direction. Her father stood rigid in conversation, his expression locked in forced pleasantry. The moment his eyes found her across the room, his smile vanished. He looks like he swallowed glass, she observed. Cole's hand settled on her lower back again, the touch growing familiar after weeks of rehearsed intimacy. That's just the appetizer. Wait for the main course. The evening progressed with calculated precision. Cole introduced Nia to key players in his world, tech investors, real estate developers, politicians. Each conversation built her credibility while reinforcing their relationship narrative. Brilliant young lawyer meets visionary businessman. Unexpected connection blossoms. None of it was true, but Nia found herself settling into the role with surprising ease. Cole's world of power and influence wasn't so different from the one she'd grown up in, just more honest about its cutthroat nature. As the formal dinner began, they were seated at a table with Meridian board members and their spouses, a strategic placement Cole had somehow engineered. Her father, thankfully, was seated across the room, though his eyes found her regularly. You're a natural at this, Cole whispered as they took their seats, his hand squeezing hers beneath the table. The gesture felt possessive in a way that sent warmth spiraling through her. Dinner conversation flowed around investment opportunities and market projections. Nia participated when appropriate, her Stanford education serving her well in discussions of financial regulations. What surprised her was how easily Cole made space for her voice, deferring to her opinions, building on her points. Whether genuine respect or excellent performance, it felt good to be valued. After dinner came the pinnacle of the evening, dancing. The museum's central court had been transformed into a ballroom, a string quartet playing from a small stage. Couples moved across the polished floor in practice steps. "I believe this is our moment," Cole said, standing and offering his hand. Nia took it, letting him lead her to the dance floor. They practiced for this, Cole insisting that authenticity in public was crucial to their plan. What she hadn't prepared for was the reality of being in his arms. His hand settled at her waist, the other clasping hers as they moved into the rhythm of the waltz. Despite his imposing presence, Cole moved with unexpected grace, guiding her effortlessly through the steps. "Everyone's watching," he murmured, drawing her slightly closer. "Including your father." "Good," she replied, though her focus had shifted from her father to the man holding her. Cole's eyes were darker in the dimmed lighting, intent on her face with an intensity that felt less like performance and more like genuine interest. Their bodies moved in perfect synchrony, the space between them charged with something neither had anticipated. His thumb traced small circles against her lower back, a private gesture hidden from onlookers but deeply felt through the thin silk of her gown. "You're a beautiful dancer," he said, voice dropping lower as he guided her through a turn that pressed her briefly against his chest. "Good teacher," she managed, pulse quickening at the contact. His smile changed then, less controlled, more genuine. For a moment, Nia glimpsed the man beneath the power broker exterior. Younger somehow, more human. As the music swelled, Cole pulled her closer than their rehearsed position, his cheek nearly touching hers. "Follow my lead," he whispered, before executing a dramatic dip that made nearby dancers pause to watch. Suspended in his strong arms, Nia felt exposed in more ways than one, not just to the watching crowd, but to the emotions rising within her. When he pulled her upright, their faces were inches apart, the moments stretching between them like spun glass. "I'm not acting anymore," she whispered, the confession slipping out before she could stop it. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, followed by heat. His hand tightened at her waist, drawing her imperceptibly closer as the music ended. "Neither am I," he admitted, the words meant for her alone. As applause broke around them, reality rushed back. This was still business, still strategy, still revenge. But as Cole led her from the dance floor, his hand warm against hers, Nia wondered if the lines they'd so carefully drawn were already blurring beyond recovery. Rain drummed against the windows of Cole's Buckhead penthouse, mirroring the storm of emotions Nia battled as she paced the bedroom that had become hers over the past month. Outside, lightning flashed across the Atlanta skyline, illuminating the space in brief, harsh bursts. Tomorrow she would marry Cole Mercer, not for love, for leverage, for justice, for her mother's legacy. So why did her heart race every time he entered a room? 3 rapid knocks on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Nia?" A moment. Cole's voice had become familiar now. The deep timbre, the careful control, the rare moments when emotion broke through. She opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, still dressed in the tailored suit he'd worn to their rehearsal dinner, though his tie hung loose around his neck. "Final changes to the guest list," he said, offering a tablet. The governor confirmed, along with 2 senators. "Your father's key investors will all be present." Nia accepted the tablet, fingers brushing his. Even that brief contact sent awareness skittering across her skin. "Maximum impact," she said, repeating his frequent phrase. "Exactly." He remained in the doorway, seemingly reluctant to enter her personal space without invitation. For a man orchestrating an elaborate revenge marriage, He'd been surprisingly respectful of her boundaries. She stepped back, a silent invitation he accepted, moving into the room with measured steps. Cole Mercer took up space wherever he went, not through bulk, but through presence. The bedroom suddenly felt smaller with him in it. Having second thoughts, he asked, studying her face. No, she answered too quickly. His mouth curved slightly. Liar. Fine, she admitted, setting the tablet aside. Not second thoughts, just thoughts. Lightning flashed again, casting his face in sharp relief, highlighting the strong jaw, the intensity in his eyes. In that instant, he looked dangerous, powerful. Everything he was supposed to be. Share them, he suggested, loosening his tie further. This plan of ours, the wedding, the announcement, we're doing it to hurt my father, to take back what's mine. But what about afterward? The contract specifies. I know what the contract says, she interrupted. 3 years minimum. Joint appearances. Shared residence. She moved to the window, watching rain streak the glass. But contracts don't cover everything. He approached, stopping a careful distance behind her. What are you asking, Nia? The sound of her name and his voice still affected her, even after weeks of hearing it. After tomorrow, we'll be husband and wife. Legally. Publicly. She turned to face him. In private, too. Understanding dawned in his eyes. The physical aspect of marriage. Yes. The contract doesn't require. I know what the contract requires, she said again, frustration bleeding into her voice. I'm asking what you want. The question hung between them, charged with a month's worth of accidental touches, lingering looks, and moments where their performance had felt too real. The penthouse went silent, except for the rain and thunder. Cole moved closer, stopping just short of touching her. What I want, he said carefully, is irrelevant to our arrangement. That's not an answer. His eyes darkened. It's the only safe one. The tension stretched taut between them. Nia had spent her life being careful, following rules, meeting expectations. Even this revenge plan had rules, boundaries, contracts. But something about standing here, hours from a wedding that was both real and fake, made her reckless. She stepped forward, eliminating the careful distance between them. What if I don't want safe? Cole remained perfectly still, though she saw the pulse jump in his throat. Nia, we're adults entering a marriage of convenience, she continued. We could set parameters for other aspects of our relationship. His hands came up to grip her upper arms, not pulling her closer, but not pushing her away either. You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking if you want me, she said bluntly. Because there are moments when I think you do. Lightning illuminated his face again, revealing naked hunger before control reasserted itself. This isn't part of our agreement. Then let's amend it. His grip tightened slightly. You're upset about tomorrow, about your father, about this whole situation. I'm perfectly clear about what I want, she countered. For a moment, she thought he would pull her to him. His eyes dropped to her mouth, his breathing shallow. But then he released her, stepping back with visible restraint. Get some sleep, he said, voice rougher than usual. Tomorrow will be intense. Disappointment flooded her, followed by embarrassment. She'd misread the situation completely. Right, of course. Cole moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. Nia. She looked up, struggling to mask her emotions. It's not that I don't want you, he said quietly. It's that once we cross that line, there's no going back. And you deserve better than a man using you to settle old scores. Before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Sleep proved elusive that night, her mind cycling through the coming day, the weeks of preparation, and the moment of vulnerability she'd just exposed. By dawn, exhaustion had finally pulled her under, delivering a few precious hours of rest before her phone chimed with a text. The wedding stylist had arrived. What followed was a whirlwind of activity, hair, makeup, dress, fittings. The ceremony would be small, just witnesses and a judge at Cole's penthouse. The reception afterward at the St. Regis would be the public spectacle, with media coverage arranged for maximum exposure. Through it all, Nia moved on autopilot, letting others direct her movements while her mind processed the reality of what she was doing. marrying a near stranger for revenge, creating a life built on calculation rather than feeling. Except feelings had developed regardless, unauthorized and inconvenient. When she finally stood in her wedding dress, a sleek ivory column with a dramatic back, the woman in the mirror looked like a stranger. Polished, perfect, poised. Exactly what Cole had needed for his plan. A knock at the door revealed the wedding planner. "It's time, Miss Hamilton. Mr. Mercer is waiting." Cole stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse living room. Atlanta spread before him like a kingdom. He turned as she entered, and for the first time since she'd met him, his composure visibly faltered. "You're breathtaking," he said simply. The raw honesty in his voice cracked something in her chest. This wasn't acting. This wasn't strategy. This was real. The judge began the ceremony, words about union and commitment flowing over Nia like water. When the moment came to exchange rings, Cole's fingers were warm against hers, steady where she trembled slightly. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Cole's kiss was gentle, restrained, appropriate for the small audience of witnesses. Yet his hand at her waist pulled her fractionally closer than necessary, his eyes conveying what his lips didn't. "Mrs. Mercer," he whispered against her mouth. And despite everything, the contracts, the revenge, the calculation, Nia felt herself falling into something far more dangerous than their original plan. The first 3 weeks of marriage passed in a carefully choreographed dance of public appearances and private distance. By day, they were the power couple gracing business luncheons and charity events. By night, they retreated to opposite ends of the penthouse. The space between their bedrooms might as well have been miles. The morning of the Meridian quarterly board meeting dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the penthouse windows as Nia reviewed documents at the kitchen island. Cole's legal team had prepared an exhaustive briefing on their strategy, leveraging her status as Charles Hamilton's daughter and Cole's wife to force discussion of the vineyard sale. "Coffee." She looked up to find Cole holding out a steaming mug, already dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. She accepted the coffee, their fingers brushing in a now familiar jolt of awareness. "Thank you. Been up long." "Since 5, he replied, pouring his own cup, finalizing details with the attorneys. They had settled into domestic rhythms, despite the artificial nature of their marriage. Cole made stronger coffee. Nia preferred the blinds open. He worked late. She rose early. Small accommodations made without discussion. "Nervous?" he asked, leaning against the counter opposite her. "Should I be?" His smile was slight but genuine. "You're facing down a boardroom of financial sharks while challenging your father's authority. A healthy dose of nerves would be normal." "I grew up watching my father dominate rooms like this," she said, sipping her coffee. "I learned the playbook early." Cole studied her over the rim of his mug. "You continue to surprise me. Nia Mercer." The name still sounded foreign. Nia Mercer, not Hamilton. A new identity crafted for strategic purposes that somehow felt more authentic than the one she'd been born with. "Good," she replied. "Predictable people make easy targets." His laugh was unexpected, warm and genuine. These glimpses of the man beneath the calculating exterior had become more frequent, each one adding complexity to her already confused feelings. "We should get moving," he said, glancing at his watch. "The car will be here in 20 minutes. Nia nodded, closing the folder. "I'll change." She turned to leave, but Cole's hand caught her wrist, stopping her. The contact was electric, his thumb resting against her pulse point. One moment, he said, voice dropping lower, "Strategy adjustment." Her heartbeat quickened. "What kind of adjustment?" "Your father needs to see that this isn't just a business arrangement between us. It weakens his position if he believes we have genuine connection. We've been playing that angle for weeks," she pointed out. "We need to push further." His eyes met hers directly. Public displays of affection, physical closeness during the meeting, making him believe there's real intimacy between us. The suggestion sent heat spiraling through her. "That won't be in the boardroom." "No, but it will be before and after." In the elevator, walking into the building, places where he and others will see us. Logical, strategic. Yet the idea of Cole touching her, even performatively, made concentration difficult. Fine, she agreed, pulling her wrist from his grasp. Whatever it takes. An hour later, they stood in the elevator of Meridian's downtown headquarters, ascending to the executive floor. Cole stood close beside her, his cologne, sandalwood, and something distinctly him, filling her senses. "Remember," he murmured as the elevator slowed, "we're madly in love." Before she could respond, his hand cupped her face, turning her toward him. "May I?" The question surprised her. Permission in the midst of calculation. She nodded, unable to form words. Cole's mouth covered hers just as the elevator doors opened. Unlike their chaste wedding kiss, this was heat and intention. His lips moved against hers with practiced precision, his hand sliding to her nape to angle her closer. Nia found herself responding instinctively, fingers gripping his lapel. The kiss lasted seconds, but when they broke apart, her lips tingled and her breathing had quickened. A performance, she reminded herself. Just strategy. Except Cole's eyes had darkened, his own breathing uneven. Not entirely performance, then. Perfect timing, he murmured, nodding toward the open doors where her father stood frozen in the hallway, clearly having witnessed their display. The board meeting proceeded exactly as Cole had orchestrated. Him presenting acquisition plans for controlling shares of Meridian, her father objecting, and Nia introducing evidence of the fraudulent vineyard transfer. The board members shifted uncomfortably as family dirty laundry aired in their sacred financial space. Throughout, Cole maintained subtle, physical contact with Nia, a hand at her back, fingers brushing hers when passing documents, knees touching beneath the table. Each contact grounded her, keeping anxiety at bay as she faced down the father who had betrayed her. "This is preposterous," Charles finally exploded after Nia presented the evidence of signature forgery. "You're dragging personal matters into a corporate boardroom." The vineyard sale funds were funneled directly into Meridian accounts, Cole countered smoothly, making it very much the board's concern. "You've poisoned my daughter against me," Charles hissed, mask finally slipping. Nia leaned forward. "I'm a Stanford-educated attorney who can read a forged document when I see one. No one poisoned me. You did this yourself." The meeting ended in a stalemate. The board unwilling to take immediate action, but clearly disturbed by the evidence presented. As people filed out, her father approached, face tight with anger. "Your mother would be ashamed," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Throwing yourself at him to spite me." Cole appeared at her side, hand settling possessively at her waist. "Problem, Charles? She's using you," her father said, desperation leaking through his anger. "Once she gets what she wants." "I'm exactly where I want to be," Nia interrupted, leaning into Cole's embrace. The half-truth felt more honest than anything she'd said in weeks. Charles stared at them both, something like fear replacing anger. "You have no idea what you've started," he warned before walking away. In the private car afterward, the adrenaline crashed, leaving Nia drained. Cole sat beside her, his own energy still humming at high frequency. "Your mother never told you why I left Atlanta, did she?" Cole asked suddenly. Nia turned to him, startled by the non-sequitur. "No. What?" His eyes met hers, something dark and unreadable in their depths. "Because if she had, you wouldn't be wearing my ring right now." Thunder cracked overhead as Nia stood in Cole's home office, her hands trembling around the yellowed envelope she'd discovered while searching for their marriage certificate. She hadn't been snooping, not intentionally. The drawer had been unlocked, the filing system meticulous as everything in Cole's life. But this envelope had been hidden beneath everything else. Addressed to Cole Mercer in her father's handwriting, postmarked 25 years ago. The letter inside had shattered everything she thought she knew. Lightning illuminated the Atlanta skyline as Cole entered the penthouse, shaking rain from his coat. "Nia?" "In here," she called, voice steadier than she felt. He appeared in the doorway, taking in her position behind his desk, the open drawer, the envelope in her hands. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something like resignation. "You found it," he said simply. "Were you ever going to tell me?" The words felt scraped from her throat. Or was this just another piece of leverage? Cole moved into the room slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" Anger flared, burning away shock. "My mother had an affair with you. My father begged you to destroy this letter acknowledging it. And there's a DNA test from 25 years ago suggesting you might be my biological father." She slammed the papers onto the desk. "That's not complicated, Cole. That's explosive." He didn't flinch at her outburst. "I was going to tell you. After the vineyard was secured. When? Before or after we slept together?" The question hung between them, charged with weeks of tension and attraction neither had fully acknowledged. Cole's jaw tightened. "That was never part of our agreement. But you wanted it to be," she challenged. "All those touches, those kisses for show. You knew this." She gestured to the letter. "And still let me believe we were just playing roles." "Our arrangement was strategic," he said, voice controlled. "The fact that there's attraction between us doesn't change that." "Attraction?" Nia laughed bitterly. "You might be my father, Cole." "The test was inconclusive," he replied immediately. "Your father demanded it when he discovered the affair. But the results showed only that I couldn't be ruled out. Science wasn't as advanced then. And you didn't think to mention this before marrying me? Would you have agreed if I had?" His question cut through her anger. "Would you have believed me or assumed it was another manipulation?" Nia moved around the desk, needing to be on equal footing. "So instead you married me knowing this possibility existed. What does that make you?" "Practical," he answered without hesitation. "The probability is low. Your father would have pursued more testing if he truly believed I was your biological father." "Practical," she repeated. "Is that what you call the way you look at me? The way you touch me when no one's watching? Just practical business considerations?" Something flashed in his eyes. Heat, frustration, desire. He stepped closer, invading her space. "What do you want me to say, Nia? That I'm attracted to you despite knowing there's a slim chance we're related? That I've spent every night since our wedding fighting the urge to cross the hallway to your room?" His raw honesty stole her breath. "Yes," she managed. "I want the truth." "Fine." "Truth." Cole's control finally cracked. "I was in love with your mother 25 years ago. We had an affair while she was married to Charles. When she ended it to save her marriage, he found out anyway. The DNA test was his idea, his way of torturing us both with a possibility." Rain lashed against the windows as he continued, each word seeming dragged from some hidden place. "I left Atlanta because your mother asked me to, because staying would have destroyed her marriage and her reputation. I built my company, my fortune, thinking someday I'd come back for her." His laugh held no humor. "Then I learned she was dying, and Charles had stolen everything from her. So you decided to steal me instead?" Nia's voice cracked. His daughter. The perfect revenge. "No." Cole moved closer, his hand lifting to her face but stopping short of touching her. "I approached you because you deserve justice. The revenge was secondary. And the attraction?" She pressed, needing to hear him say it. His eyes darkened. "Unexpected, unwanted, undeniable." The admission hung between them, charged with weeks of restraint and new complications. Nia should step back, should process everything rationally. Instead, she found herself swaying toward him, drawn by something stronger than logic. "The test doesn't prove I'm your father," he said, voice rough with emotion. "But it doesn't prove I'm not." "Then we get another test," she said. "Modern science. Definitive answers. And if it confirms we're not related?" The question carried weight beyond genetics. Nia met his gaze directly. "Then we renegotiate our arrangement." Something flared in his eyes. Hope, perhaps. Or hunger. "And if it suggests otherwise?" "Then we deal with that too." Cole finally bridged the distance between them, his hand cupping her cheek. The touch sent electricity through her despite everything, or perhaps because of it. The forbidden nature of their connection only heightened its intensity. "I never meant to hurt you," he said quietly. "Everything else in our arrangement has been calculated. but not how I feel when I'm with you. Nia's hand covered his against her face. I need time. Space to think. He nodded, starting to step back, but she held his hand in place. But I also need you to know that whatever the test shows, these past weeks haven't been just strategy for me either. The confession cost her, vulnerability never coming easily. Cole's eyes softened, thumb tracing her cheekbone in a gesture too tender for their complicated situation. We'll get the test, he promised. Whatever the results, we face them together. Nia nodded, finally letting his hand go. As he moved away, creating the space she'd requested, she felt the loss physically, a testimony to how deeply he'd already worked his way under her skin. Cole, she called as he reached the door. He turned, waiting. Did you love her? My mother. Really love her? Pain flashed across his face, old but still sharp. Yes, more than I thought possible. His eyes held hers. Until now. The words lingered after he left, echoing in the storm-lit office alongside thunder. Nia sank into his chair, the letter that had upended everything still spread across the desk. Possibility and prohibition, desire and doubt, all tangled together in a knot she couldn't unravel. Not tonight. Perhaps not ever. Morning light filtered through the bedroom curtains as Nia stared at the ceiling, sleep having eluded her most of the night. The DNA test appointment was scheduled for that afternoon. A private lab Cole knew, where discretion was guaranteed and results expedited. 3 days had passed since her discovery of the letter. 3 days of careful distance between them, of polite conversation and avoided gazes. The penthouse felt both too large and too small, enough space to avoid physical proximity, but not enough to escape awareness of each other's presence. A soft knock at her door broke the morning silence. Come in, she called, sitting up against the headboard. Cole entered, already dressed in casual weekend clothes, dark jeans, and a gray Henley that somehow looked as sophisticated as his suits. He carried a tray with coffee and pastries, setting it carefully on the bedside table. Peace offering, he said, hands sliding into his pockets after. And information. Nia reached for the coffee, grateful for the caffeine and the distraction. What kind of information? I've spoken with Marcus Chun, he said, referring to his chief legal counsel, about our options regarding the vineyard and Meridian. Business. Safe territory. And we have 3 paths forward. Cole remained standing, maintaining careful distance. First, continue pressure on the Meridian board until they force your father to relinquish control of the vineyard property. Nia sipped her coffee. That could take months. Yes. Second option, file criminal charges for forgery and fraud. The evidence is substantial, but it becomes public, she finished. Messy, potentially damaging to both families. He nodded. The third option is more direct. I buy controlling interest in the development company that purchased the vineyard. They're overextended on several projects. Vulnerable. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. You control the property without directly confronting my father. Exactly. We could halt construction immediately, begin restoration. Nia considered the options, the strategic part of her brain engaging despite the emotional turmoil of recent days. The third option. How quickly? 2 weeks. Maybe less. She nodded, decision made. Do it. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. For all their personal complications, they still worked well together, minds aligned in purpose if nothing else. There's something else, Cole said, shifting his weight slightly. About the test today. Tension immediately returned, tightening her shoulders. What about it? Whatever the results, we need to discuss what comes next. For us, for this marriage. The question that had kept her awake all night, now hanging between them in daylight. Isn't that dependent on what we learn? Not entirely. Cole finally moved closer, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed, distance still maintained. The contract stands regardless. 3 years, joint appearances, financial arrangements as agreed. But the personal aspect would change, she said quietly. His eyes met hers directly. Perhaps, but that's what we need to discuss. For weeks they had danced around attraction, using it when convenient for their public image, denying it in private. Now they faced the possibility of either liberation or permanent prohibition. If the test confirms we're not related, Nia began carefully, what would you want to change about our arrangement? Cole's gaze intensified. I think you know the answer to that. Heat bloomed across her skin despite her attempts at detachment. And if the results are problematic, then we maintain strict boundaries. Continue the public facade while keeping appropriate distance in private. The clinical way he outlined their potential future stung more than Nia expected. Just like that, switch feelings on or off depending on genetic results. I didn't say it would be easy, he replied, a rare hint of vulnerability in his voice. But I'm saying we have options regardless. Nia set her coffee aside, needing her hands free for what came next. She moved closer to him on the bed, close enough to catch his subtle intake of breath. We've spent weeks pretending, she said quietly, playing roles for others. I don't want to keep pretending with you, no matter what that test shows. His control visibly wavered, hands clenching at his sides. Nia, if we're not related, I want to explore what's between us. Really explore it, not just for show. Her courage built with each word. And if we are, then we deal with that honestly too. No more strategic displays or calculated touches. Just truth between us. Cole's hand moved to cover hers on the bedspread, the warmth of his palm against her skin both comforting and electric. Truth, he agreed, voice rough. Whatever it costs us. The moment stretched between them, loaded with possibilities and prohibitions. His thumb traced small circles on her wrist, the simple contact sending awareness through her entire body. We should get ready, he finally said, pulling his hand away with visible reluctance. The appointment's at 2. Nia nodded, already missing his touch. I'll be ready. As he stood to leave, she caught his wrist, stopping him. Cole. He turned, waiting. Thank you for the coffee and the honesty. Something softened in his expression, the businessman giving way to the man beneath. Always, he promised before leaving her alone with cooling coffee and complicated thoughts. Hours later, sitting in the sterile waiting room of a discreet medical facility, Nia watched Cole sign paperwork with steady hands. Whatever happened next would change everything between them, liberating desire or cementing boundaries. As the technician called their names, Cole's eyes met hers. No words passed between them, but the message was clear. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Truth demanded nothing less. 3 weeks after the DNA test, Nia stood in the center of a community hall in East Atlanta, surrounded by stacks of moving boxes and volunteers. The results had arrived within days, definitive, undeniable proof that she and Cole shared no biological connection. The relief had been immediate, the aftermath more complicated. They'd celebrated with a dinner that turned into drinks that turned into a night of confessions, boundaries falling as easily as autumn leaves. But when the moment came to cross the final line, Cole had pulled back, insisting they take time. Build something real before giving in to physical attraction. His restraint was both frustrating and oddly endearing. Now they worked side by side on his latest project, a community resource center in a neighborhood facing gentrification. Cole had purchased the building quietly, donating it to a local organization while funding renovations. Today marked the soft opening, with computer stations, job training resources, and legal aid services all coming online. The youth center section still needs work, Cole said, appearing at her side with a clipboard. He dressed down for the occasion, jeans and a button-down with rolled sleeves that revealed strong forearms. The contractor promises it'll be ready next week. It's already impressive, Nia replied, watching volunteers set up the last of the computer stations. I didn't expect you to be so hands-on with a project like this. Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. You thought I just wrote checks and walked away? Honestly? Yes. His laugh was genuine, a sound she'd heard more frequently since the test results cleared the air between them. I built my first company in a neighborhood like this. People helped me when they didn't have to. I don't forget. This was the Cole few people saw, the man beneath the power broker exterior. Each glimpse added depth to her understanding of him, making what had begun as a business arrangement feel increasingly like something else entirely. A community organizer approached, pulling Cole into conversation about program funding. Nia watched him listen intently, asking thoughtful questions that revealed genuine interest rather than performative charity. This wasn't for show, no press, no cameras, no publicity. Her phone buzzed with a news alert, pulling her attention away. The headline made her stomach drop. Hamilton heiress charity work. Image rehabilitation or genuine reform? The attached photo showed her and Cole at a fundraiser last week, his hand at the small of her back, her smile directed up at him. The article questioned their motives, suggesting their marriage was either a business merger or, worse, a calculated move to distract from allegations against her father. Anonymous sources, clearly from her father's camp, painted her as manipulated by Cole, while others suggested she was using him for financial gain. Bad news, Cole asked, returning to her side. She handed him the phone without comment. His expression darkened as he read, jaw tightening. "Your father's work?" he said finally. "Trying to undermine us publicly since he can't do it privately. Does it bother you?" she asked. "People thinking I married you for money?" Cole's eyes met hers, intensity replacing anger. "What bothers me is anyone questioning your integrity. The rest is noise." The simple defense warmed her more than elaborate protestations would have. Cole handed back her phone, his fingers brushing hers in a touch that still sent electricity through her veins. "The article mentioned the Vineyard Project," she said. "How do they know?" "They don't know details," he assured her. "Just that we've acquired the property. The full restoration plans are still private." 2 weeks ago, Cole had successfully purchased the development company that owned her mother's vineyard. Construction had halted immediately, and initial assessments for restoration had begun. They planned to visit the property next week, the first time Nia would see it since the bulldozers had been removed. "We should address this," she said, gesturing to the article. "Get ahead of my father's narrative." Cole considered this, his strategic mind visibly working. Not with words, with actions. He nodded toward the community center around them. Real work speaks louder than press releases. As if to prove his point, a young woman approached them tentatively, clutching paperwork. "Excuse me, Mr. Mercer? The volunteer said you might be able to help with my lease review." Without hesitation, Cole guided the woman to a quiet corner, pulling up a chair for her. Nia watched as he reviewed the document, explaining tenant rights in simple terms, pointing out concerning clauses. This was the man her father feared, not because of his wealth or power, but because Cole Mercer's influence came from genuine connection rather than manipulation. He built rather than extracted, empowered rather than controlled. The headline buzzed again. Nia silenced her phone, refusing to let her father's tactics distract from the work at hand. She joined a group of volunteers assembling welcome packages, losing herself in the simple act of helping. Hours later, as they left the center, Cole's hand found hers in the parking lot. A gesture that had nothing to do with appearances and everything to do with growing connection. "Foundation," he said as they reached the car, not as charity, but as legacy. The words settled between them, weighted with possibility and shared purpose. Nia's fingers tightened around his, the small gesture answering more eloquently than words could have. What had begun as revenge was slowly, steadily transforming into something neither had anticipated. Something with roots that reached deeper than strategy. Something that might outlast the original plan entirely. The North Carolina hills rolled past the car windows, autumn painting the landscape in golds and reds. Nia watched familiar landmarks appear as they neared her mother's vineyard, anticipation building with each mile. "Nervous?" Cole asked from the driver's seat, one hand resting on the console between them. "Excited," she corrected. "It's been 2 months since we were here. I keep imagining what it looks like without the construction equipment." His hand moved to cover hers briefly. "The restoration team has made progress, but there's still a lot to do. Managing expectations. Always the businessman," she teased, though the gentle squeeze she gave his hand softened the words. They've fallen into a rhythm over the past weeks. working together on vineyard plans during the day, sharing meals and conversation in the evenings, gradually allowing physical closeness without rushing toward intimacy. The foundation of something real was forming beneath the contractual framework of their marriage. The car turned onto the familiar gravel road, now smoothed and widened. As they crested the final hill, Nia's breath caught. Where construction trenches had scarred the land, neat rows of supports for new vines now stood in orderly formation. The demolished tasting room had been cleared, its foundation marked for rebuilding. Workers moved purposefully across the property, some planting, others constructing trellises. "You've been busy," she said, voice thick with emotion. Cole parked near a temporary office trailer. "The agricultural team located several of your mother's original vine stocks from cuttings she'd given to other vineyards. They're propagating them now." The thoughtfulness of this detail, tracking down her mother's specific grape varieties rather than starting fresh, made Nia's chest tighten. Cole noticed everything, remembered everything. A man in muddy boots approached as they exited the car. "Mr. Mercer, Ms. Hamilton Mercer, we've prepared everything for your walkthrough." "Thank you, Jim," Cole replied. "We'll start with the south field." The project manager led them through the property, explaining restoration timelines and challenges. Nia listened with half an ear, more focused on the transformation already visible. The land felt alive again, purposeful. When they reached the experimental vines, the ones that had somehow survived the developers, Nia stopped to touch the leaves, now properly supported and thriving. "These will produce next season," Jim explained. "Your mother's hybrid. Early tests suggest it's quite unique. High tannin structure, but unexpectedly bright fruit notes." "She worked on this variety for a decade," Nia said softly. "Called it her legacy project." Cole stepped closer, his presence warm beside her. "What did she name it?" "She didn't officially, but in her notes, she called it Nia's Promise." The revelation hung in the autumn air, another thread connecting past to present. Cole's hand found the small of her back, steadying her as emotion threatened to overwhelm. "Jim, give us a moment," he said quietly. The manager nodded, moving back toward the office trailer. When they were alone among the vines, Cole turned to face her. "We could make it official. Label the first vintage with that name." Nia nodded, not trusting her voice immediately. "She'd like that." His hand moved to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away moisture she hadn't realized had escaped. "You honor her every day, you know, by fighting for this place, by rebuilding." The tenderness in his voice broke something open inside her, grief mingling with gratitude, loss with new beginnings. Without overthinking, Nia leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss unlike their public performances. No audience to impress, no strategy to advance. Just connection, growing desire, and something deeper neither had named yet. Cole's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened, autumn sun warm on their shoulders. When they finally parted, his eyes had darkened, hands still holding her close. "Not exactly what I planned for our business trip," he murmured, voice rough. Nia smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Plans change." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of vineyard logistics and renovation timelines. They reviewed architectural plans for the rebuilt tasting room and main house, discussed grape varieties and production goals. Through it all, something had shifted between them, touches lingering longer, glances holding deeper meaning. As sunset painted the hills in deepening gold, they stood on what would become the tasting room terrace, overlooking rows of future vines. "We should head back," Cole said reluctantly. "Long drive to Atlanta." Nia turned to him, decision forming. "Or we could stay." His eyebrow raised slightly. "The house isn't habitable yet. There's a hotel in town, 20 minutes away." The boldness in her voice surprised even her. "If you want." Understanding darkened his eyes. "Nia, no pressure," she added quickly. "Just an option. If you're ready to move forward." "If we're ready." Cole stepped closer, hands settling at her waist with careful restraint. "I've been ready since the day I met you," he admitted. "But I want it to be right, not rushed." not part of the strategy. And now, she asked, heart racing beneath her ribs. His answer came in the form of a kiss, deeper than before, hunger no longer contained. When they broke apart, breathing uneven, his decision was clear. Call the hotel, he murmured against her lips. I'll tell Jim we're staying in the area tonight. As twilight settled over the vineyard, Nia watched Cole speaking with the project manager, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. What had begun as cold calculation had transformed into something neither had anticipated, something with roots as deep as the vines they were planting. Something that, like her mother's special grapes, might yield an unexpected harvest. Rain pounded against the bedroom windows, the storm matching Nia's mood as she stared at her phone. The headline glared back at her, Hamilton family scandal. Daughter's marriage questioned as financial impropriety alleged. 6 months into their marriage, just as the vineyard restoration had begun showing real progress, her father had launched his counterattack. The bedroom door opened as Cole emerged from the shower, towel wrapped around his waist, hair still damp. The sight would normally distract her, their physical relationship having blossomed in the months since that night in North Carolina. But today, even his presence couldn't dispel her anger. He's calling our marriage fraudulent, she said without preamble, holding up the phone. Claims we conspired to manipulate Meridian stock prices. Cole's expression hardened as he moved to sit beside her on the bed. Let me see. She handed him the phone, watching his face as he read. The article cited anonymous sources close to Charles Hamilton, alleging that Cole had orchestrated their marriage solely to destabilize Meridian Financial, with Nia as either victim or willing accomplice, depending which source was quoted. He's desperate, Cole said finally, setting the phone aside. The vineyard restoration is nearly complete. The fraud investigation into the original sale is progressing. He's lashing out by questioning our marriage. Nia stood, needing to move. He's making me sound like either a gold digger or a fool. Cole watched her pace, concern evident in his eyes. Does it matter what he says? We know the truth. The question stopped her. What was the truth? Their marriage had begun as strategy, as leverage against her father. That much aligned with his accusations. But somewhere along the way, calculation had transformed into genuine connection. Nights spent planning revenge had become nights spent planning their future. Practice touches had become necessary ones. It matters because he's using the truth to tell lies, she said finally. Yes, we married quickly. Yes, there were financial motivations. But he's twisting it. Cole stood, crossing to her in 2 strides. His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. Nia, what began as strategy isn't that anymore. You know that. The certainty in his voice steadied her. Whatever their beginning, what they had now was real, complicated and unconventional, but genuine. I know, she admitted, but others don't. This could impact the vineyard launch, the community projects, everything we've built. Then we fight back, not with denials, with evidence. Within hours, Cole's team had assembled documentation showing the vineyard restoration's progress, community investment projects, and timeline of Meridian stock transactions, proving no manipulation had occurred. By evening, several business publications had run counter-stories highlighting their legitimate business activities. But the damage control took its toll. Potential investors in the vineyard relaunch hesitated, citing family complications. Community partners questioned their involvement, concerned about negative publicity. Even the vineyard restoration team seemed uneasy, wondering if the project might be abandoned. A week of damage control left them both exhausted. Nia sat in their living room late one night, legal briefs spread across the coffee table, when Cole joined her with 2 glasses of wine. From the test batches, he explained, handing her glass. First harvest from your mother's saved vines. The simple gesture, bringing her mother's creation back to life, momentarily broke through her stress. She accepted the glass, their fingers brushing in the familiar spark that never diminished. Thank you. She sipped, eyes widening at the complex flavor. It's good, really good. Like mother, like daughter, Cole said, settling beside her on the couch. The vineyard manager says your modifications to the irrigation system are improving yields already. Pride warmed her alongside the wine. She'd thrown herself into the restoration, applying her mother's notes and her own research to enhance the original processes. The work connected her to her mother in ways grief alone couldn't. "My father won't stop," she said after a comfortable silence. "This is just the beginning." "No, it's the end," Cole replied with unexpected conviction. "He's played his best card and it didn't work. The allegations aren't sticking, but the doubt remains." She set her glass down, turning to face him fully. "Maybe we should be more transparent about how we started, why we married." Cole's expression grew serious. "You want to admit our marriage began as a business arrangement?" "Not exactly, but maybe acknowledge there were complicated circumstances. That we came together during a difficult time. Not lies, just controlled truth." He considered this, strategic mind visibly working. It would disarm him, take away the power of the secret. Exactly. Their eyes met in shared understanding, a silent communication that had developed over months of partnership. This was why they worked so well together. Why what had begun as convenience had evolved into something necessary. Cole's hand found hers, fingers interlacing. "Whatever you want to share, I'm with you. But know this," his voice deepened, grew more intense. "What I feel for you now isn't strategy. It's not convenience or calculation." The words hung between them, approaching but not quite reaching the declaration neither had yet made explicitly. Their relationship had evolved in reverse. Marriage first, then partnership, then genuine connection. The final acknowledgement remained unspoken, though increasingly evident in everyday actions. The headline smiled. The article gutted. Nia murmured, echoing something her mother once said about press coverage. "But we're still standing." Cole's thumb traced circles on her palm, the simple touch grounding her. More than standing, building. Outside, the storm began to subside, rain softening to a gentle patter against the windows. Inside, another kind of storm gathered, one born of shared purpose and growing feeling, powerful enough to weather whatever her father might throw at them next. They had begun as adversaries to Charles Hamilton. They had become partners in business and life. And now, facing his desperate attacks, they discovered something unexpected. They had become each other's shelter in the storm. The Meridian Financial boardroom fell silent as Nia and Cole entered, hand in hand. 8 months into their marriage, they had finally secured enough proxy votes for this moment. A special meeting to address Charles Hamilton's misconduct regarding the vineyard property and other alleged improprieties. Board members and executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Charles sat at the head of the table, face impassive but knuckles white where they gripped his pen. Beside him, Meridian's general counsel looked distinctly unhappy. "Thank you for accommodating this special session," Cole began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. "The documentation has been distributed. I suggest we move directly to discussion." The documentation was damning. Forensic accounting reports showing Charles had diverted Yvonne Hamilton's assets into Meridian accounts, manipulated power of attorney documents during her illness, and subsequently used company resources to develop the improperly acquired property. "This is a witch hunt," Charles said dismissively. "My daughter and her husband have personal grievances they're attempting to dress up as corporate concerns." Nia stepped forward, her Harvard law training evident in her calm precision. "The evidence speaks for itself. My mother's signature was forged on transfer documents. Company funds were improperly allocated. These aren't personal grievances, they're potential criminal violations." For 2 hours, the discussion circled these points, Charles deflecting, the board increasingly concerned as each defense crumbled under scrutiny. Cole contributed strategic insights, while Nia handled the legal arguments, their teamwork seamless after months of preparation. When the board chairman finally called for a brief recess, Charles approached them in the hallway, fury barely contained. "You've rehearsed this well," he hissed, eyes darting between them. The devoted couple fighting for justice. "Does the board know your marriage is a sham? That you married him to spite me?" Cole's hand settled at the small of Nia's back. No longer a calculated gesture, but an instinctive one. Be careful, Charles. Desperation doesn't suit you. Desperation? Charles laughed bitterly. I'm trying to protect my daughter from a man who's using her. I don't need protection, Nia countered. I need honesty. Something you've never provided. Her father's expression shifted, desperation bleeding through anger. You have no idea what you're involved in. What happened between your mother and Cole? I know everything, she interrupted. About their relationship. About the DNA test you demanded. About how you drove him away when Mom was pregnant. Charles paled visibly. He told you. We both did, Cole interjected. No more secrets. Something broke in Charles then. The careful facade of control crumbling after decades of maintenance. You have no right to her, he said to Cole, voice dropping. You didn't raise her. You didn't watch her grow up. You didn't love her? Cole finished. That's where you're wrong. I do love her. Not as the child I might have fathered. The test confirmed that question. But as the woman she is now. The partner she's become. The declaration, the first time Cole had spoken those words aloud, landed in the hallway like a physical presence. Nia's breath caught, her eyes finding his in silent question. The intensity she found there confirmed the truth of his statement. Charles watched this exchange with growing horror. This isn't possible. You married for revenge. For business. We married for many reasons, Nia acknowledged. But we stayed together for better ones. The board members began filtering back into the conference room, ending their private confrontation. Charles moved woodenly toward his seat, the fight visibly draining from him as the chairman called the meeting back to order. What followed was a formal reckoning. Motions to remove Charles from his position, proposals for financial restitution, discussions of potential criminal referrals. Through it all, Charles sat silently, occasionally glancing toward Nia with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Anger mixed with something that might have been regret. When the final votes were tallied, Charles Hamilton had been removed from his chairmanship and suspended from the board pending investigation. The room emptied quickly afterward, executives eager to distance themselves from the fallen leader. Only Nia, Cole, and Charles remained, the weight of decades of conflict hanging in the air between them. I protected you, Charles finally said, breaking the silence. From the rumors, from the questions about your paternity, from him. He gestured toward Cole without looking at him. By stealing my mother's legacy? Nia asked quietly. By lying to me my entire life? I did what I thought necessary. No, Cole interjected. You did what was easiest for you, what protected your pride and your position, not what was best for Yvonne or Nia. Charles finally looked directly at Cole, decades of resentment visible in his gaze. You never deserved either of them. Maybe not, Cole agreed, surprising both Hamiltons. But I respected their choices, something you never managed. Charles stood abruptly, gathering his papers with shaking hands. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Nia said firmly. The vineyard restoration is nearly complete. The legal ownership has been transferred back to my name. Your position here is finished. It's time to accept that and move forward. For a moment, something like vulnerability crossed her father's face, a glimpse of the man beneath the ambition and control. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then clutched suddenly at his chest, papers scattering across the polished table. Dad! Nia moved toward him instinctively. Charles Hamilton collapsed into his chair, face contorted in pain. Can't breathe. Cole was already calling for an ambulance, voice calm despite the emergency. Nia knelt beside her father, supporting him as his breathing grew labored. Stay with me, Dad, she urged, professional detachment failing as medical emergency overrode years of conflict. His eyes found hers, panic giving way to an urgent need to communicate. The second test, he gasped, fingers clutching her arm with surprising strength. I switched the samples 25 years ago. The confession landed like a physical blow. What? But her father's eyes were closing, consciousness fading as his grip loosened. The medical team arrived moments later, efficiently transferring him to a stretcher and rushing him from the room. In the sudden quiet, Nia turned to Cole, shock evident on her face. "Did you hear?" "I heard," he confirmed, his own expression carefully controlled. "We'll deal with it after we know he's stable." She nodded, grateful for his steadiness as her world tilted yet again. Together they followed the medical team, hands clasped tightly between them, united despite the earthquake of uncertainty her father's final words had triggered. Whatever truth awaited them, they would face it together. The foundation they'd built was stronger than secrets now, whether old or newly revealed. The vineyard spread before them, morning mist lifting to reveal neat rows of vines heavy with the first full harvest. 6 months had passed since the boardroom confrontation. 6 months of rebuilding, of healing, of truth gradually replacing secrets. Nia stood on the terrace of the newly reconstructed main house, coffee warming her hands against the autumn chill. Behind her, Cole moved about the kitchen, the domestic sounds of comfort she'd never expected to find in this arrangement turned partnership turned love. Her father had survived the heart attack, though his recovery remained slow. The confession he'd gasped before losing consciousness had proven true. He had indeed tampered with the original DNA test 25 years ago, switching samples to create doubt where certainty should have existed. The modern test Nia and Cole had taken 8 months earlier had been definitive. No biological connection existed between them. Charles Hamilton's deception had been one final attempt to control his wife's choices, to punish her for loving someone else. The revelation might have shattered some relationships. For Nia and Cole, it simply removed the last shadow from their path forward together. "Thinking deep thoughts?" Cole asked, joining her on the terrace with his own coffee. "Just appreciating the view," she replied, leaning against him as his arm circled her waist. "Hard to believe we're actually here, that we did this." The vineyard restoration had been completed 3 months ago, with the tasting room opening to the public shortly after. Hamilton Mercer wines had already generated buzz in industry publications, with advance orders for their first vintage exceeding projections. "Your mother will be proud," Cole said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Of the vineyard. Of you." Nia smiled, turning in his embrace to face him. At 49, Cole Mercer remained imposing, silver threading through his dark hair only adding to his authority. But the hardness that had defined him when they met had softened, at least with her. "I got the final transfer documents yesterday," she said. "The remaining Meridian shares are officially in our foundation's name." The Cole and Nia Mercer Foundation had become their joint project, channeling resources from both the vineyard and their business holdings into community development, education, and entrepreneurship programs across the Southeast. "Good timing," he replied. "The youth center expansion breaks ground next week." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun burn away the last wisps of morning fog. Workers were already moving among the vines, preparing for the day's harvest. In the distance, cars occasionally turned into the tasting room parking area, early visitors eager to sample the limited pre-release offerings. "I spoke with my father yesterday," Nia said after a while. "He's being released from the rehabilitation center next week." Cole's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "How did he sound?" "Subdued. Different." She shook her head slightly. The stroke changed him, or maybe just slowed him down enough to reflect. The massive stroke that had followed Charles Hamilton's heart attack had left him physically diminished and uncharacteristically introspective. Their conversations over recent months had been awkward, but increasingly honest, a fragile bridge forming where a chasm had existed. "Will he come to the Harvest Festival?" Cole asked, surprising her with the question. She looked up at him. "You be okay with that?" His smile was slight but genuine. "He's your father, Nia. Whatever happened between us in the past, he's part of your life. That matters to me because you matter to me." The simple statement encompassed everything their relationship had become. Consideration replacing calculation, genuine care replacing strategic advantage. "I love you," she said, the words still new enough to carry weight despite their increasing frequency. "Not because of contracts or convenience. Just you." Cole set his coffee aside, hands moving to frame her face with gentle possession. "And I love you. Not for revenge or legacy. Just you." His kiss was tender, unhurried, the security of commitment replacing the urgency of uncertainty. When they separated, his forehead rested against hers, shared breath between them. "The doctor called yesterday," Nia said quietly, heart racing with news she'd been saving for this moment. The blood work confirmed it. "I'm pregnant." Cole went perfectly still, his hands tightening fractionally against her skin. "Pregnant," he repeated, voice rough with emotion. 8 weeks. She searched his face, finding wonder replacing shock. "I know it wasn't part of our original agreement." His laugh interrupted her, joy replacing careful control. "Nothing about us has followed the original agreement." His hand moved to rest gently against her still flat stomach. "This is better." As the morning sun warmed the vineyard around them, Nia leaned into his embrace, savoring the moment. What had begun as cold calculation had blossomed into something neither could have anticipated. A partnership founded on shared purpose, strengthened through honesty, and transformed by genuine love. The life inside her was chosen, not bargained. A new chapter in a story that had evolved far beyond its original outline. Whatever came next, they would write it together, word by word, day by day, season by season. Just as her mother's vines had survived against all odds, their unexpected connection had taken root and flourished. The harvest promised to be extraordinary.